Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well today. In this video, we're discussing Alpha 4.1 and the additions that make it one of the biggest patches we have received in a long time, and how it shows off our first forms of progression and meaningful gameplay that we have seen in the verse. Now, before we get started, if you like what I'm doing here, feel free to subscribe. I have channel memberships open if you'd like to go that extra mile, and I would love to have you in the community Discord if you would like to join. Besides that, let's talk Alpha 4.1. Now, before we move on to some of the more important stuff of 4.1, we have to talk about the death tax thing that we saw in some of the latest 4.1 builds. Now, to clear the air, it is confirmed that that being in the game right now was unintentional. Though I actually do think this might be a part of something in the near future. Originally, I thought this would be something for tier 1 item recovery or trying to get you to not respawn if you have to. But in the latest ISC, basically the only Star Citizen related news that we got has to do with attacks during the Invictus celebration and troubles with regeneration technology. And given the fact that the latest loading screen has an article dedicated to troubles with regenning after a crash, it makes me think that this death tax could be real. Now, don't take this as confirmed in any way, shape, or form. This is just speculation, but I think this death tax could be a part of this narrative in some way, shape, or form. I still feel very iffy about it because the amount of money that it said on the screen that you would have to pay to regen is a pretty large amount, especially to the players that don't play that often. But we'll have to see how this goes in with any narrative stuff that they have in the future. As well, if this is maybe a part of tier 1 item recovery, they just might implement it a little bit sooner than we think. It really is going to be something they're going to need to talk about a little bit in the future. Regardless, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this death tax thing. Do you think it's part of this narrative? Do you think it's just some really random implementation? I would love to hear your thoughts. Now, moving on to one of the best parts of Alpha 4.1, in my opinion, this patch is going to offer you, the player, the ability to earn rewards like a Polaris without any real money or anything like that. This all revolves around our new mission giver, Wicklow. The rewards include special armors, weapon skins for the Volt Rifle, ships, and most likely many other items down the line. This is our first look at meaningful, purposeful gameplay with some minor progression. And one of the most important updates for players, if you want to earn ships in game without simply doing contracts for money, you're finally in luck. But the most important aspects of this is that CIG can now do this for many, many other types of content. Whether that be expanding Wicklow's offers by giving players even more rewards, or by giving other mission givers similar reward styles. I think this is one of the first updates that really starts to offer some potential for players trying to earn items in game, and I think this is a great step in the right direction. Now, for things like the Polaris, it's not going to be easy. I looked at there are 6 contracts in order to get the Polaris, it seems, and the first one by itself is already a whole bunch of stuff. So I don't anticipate it's going to be easy, but for players that want something to move towards you rather than just earning money over and over and over, you finally have that and you can actually get a tangible item from that grind, from that work. So let me know though. Are you interested in doing these things in game? Are you excited about the rewards and the fact that you can actually earn things in game and not just through like the pledge store or grinding contracts to buy a new ship? I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Now, that is a really cool part of 4.1, but one of the other cool parts is the valkar. Now, this is actually in the game now. Full disclosure though, at the moment it is only the smallest valkar that we have in game, the juvenile. But I do think it is very obvious that the adult and apex will come in the very near future. I unfortunately have not been able to get footage of these little beasts, but they seem to spawn at the Hathor facilities once the laser is activated. I don't think there's a ton of reasons to fight these things at the moment, but it really is cool to see them in our first form of the Valakar. And trust me, I'm going to update you as soon as we get the adult and the Apex. Can't tell you when necessarily, but I do think it'll be a really, really cool thing when they drop those in. Now, of course, we cannot talk about 4.1 without talking about the new event, that being Align and Mine. This uses the Hathor facilities, one the orbiting laser, as well as 3 ground facilities. You do a set of tasks that we've talked about a little bit before. I'm not going to really run through it here just because I'm trying to make this a quicker video for you guys, but once you finish that task, you open up or you use the laser, it'll open up a cave for you. That'll give you valuable minables that you can use for, of course, you can sell them, or you can give them to Wicklow, which will in return get you some of those unique items we talked about. And this laser will also spawn some of those valkar like we talked about before. Right now, again, the valkar aren't really a big thing yet. They're kind of just a really cool fauna to fight off whenever they're at these facilities. But in the future, once we get that adult and adult and apex, it's going to be a really, really cool thing and have some awesome and valuable rewards. By itself, the event is solid. I think it's a really solid push in the right direction for just having things around the systems for players to actually do without, having to activate a contract or anything like that. But currently they are very busy. The locations have a ton of people there. There's some, interesting PvP going on as well, but the servers are also acting a little rough. So by itself, it's been a little bit of a rough experience for the event, but I think in the long term, it's going to be a really, really positive change to the verse, as well as offering things like this around the verse in the future will be a good way of kind of separating players and giving more players the room to breathe whenever they do these activities. Now, that's going to be it for a line in mind, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Is this event something you want to run? Do you want to run it, down the line when it becomes a little bit less busy? Do you hate it as a whole? I would love to hear any of your thoughts, good or bad. Now, moving on to some ship changes, this is by itself a really, really awesome change. And that is that in 4.1, ships have changed with how their collision works. Collision now goes off of the physics data, which takes things into consideration such as mass and speed. This is a really important change for a couple of reasons. The first one, and the one that I think a lot of people are excited about, is that ramming big ships with smaller ships is no longer just a simple one hit kill. I know this is going to help for a lot of players that find themselves in those more unique situations where people tend to do that. But I think, it's a solid change in order to mitigate those issues a little bit right now. I also think this is a solid precursor to things like Maelstrom and engineering. These two systems bring a much more physicalized nature to our ships, and this update seems like it could be laying some of the foundation for these features down the line. That doesn't mean that they are coming soon necessarily, but I think this is a great addition that's going to benefit a lot of players. Generally, I think it is kind of unique that they drop this in very subtly. Of course, they mention it in the patch notes, but it seems like one of those bigger changes that they would want to talk about a little bit more. But at the end of the day, it's a solid addition to the patch notes, and I think any positive changes to ships and quality of life updates are needed and appreciated. Now, some of the other ship changes that we have to talk about as well. The first being that the Carrack, the Raft, the Reclaimer, Hercules, and Valkyrie have all received the ability to fire weapons from the pilot seat. They've done this by using some of the unmanned weapons on the ship to connect automatically to the pilot seat whenever they are not in use. Now, I'm not entirely sure how this is going to go well with balancing quite yet, but I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Generally, I want to wait a little bit, see how it works in game, just for a bit of time before I kind of make my final opinion on it regardless. So I would love to hear your thoughts and see how this works in game. Now, other changes that aren't necessarily as positive for some players is going to be that the Pisces Cutter and SRV all lose a large amount of quantum fuel to bring them in line with smaller ships. I think this is still an okay change, though the SRV in particular might need some more balancing given its role. It's basically a tow truck in space, and I know that this is gonna be one of the most important ships for pirates that want to actually take a ship and bring it back to their location so that they can, you know, reclaim the title or just salvage it as a whole. Regardless, I'm not too worried because I know it will get some balancing over time if it needs it, but it is a little weird to see such a significant change to a ship that would probably need it over, some of these other smaller ships. One of these other changes that we got to ships, though, is also the adjustment to third and first person camera shake. This is actually a pretty interesting one. It's not necessarily an issue in game, but it does seem like it needs a little bit of balancing for some players. For me in particular, I kind of like the shake as a whole, but in 4.1, it still feels pretty solid, even though it's been toned down a little bit more. I think the overall issue with this is that when you look at your ship in third person, it kind of just looks really jittery in some of those situations. And then in first person, it becomes very difficult to read any text during those shakes, which I'm okay with it becoming a little bit distorted, but sometimes it can get pretty bad. So I think that's a pretty solid quality of life change. And if it needs balancing, I'm sure they'll do a little bit of that in the future. Now that is going to wrap it up for this video. I really appreciate you being here. I just wanted to get you as much 4.1 news in your hands as quickly as possible. Just some of the bigger things that are going to be, monumental for this patch by itself. 4.1 should be going live in the next week or two. They seem to be wrapping it up a little bit more. It needs some more stabilization, but it is getting there. Besides that, I want to hear your thoughts on death tax, all the things that are going on with the 4.1. If you have any big thoughts on it, I'd love to hear them. Besides that, though, I really appreciate you being here. If you'd like to join the community Discord, I would love to have you there. My next video is going to be about the Drake Ironclad, so feel free to stick around for that. That should be coming out in a couple days. But again, I appreciate you being here. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.